Welcome to this podcast, Uncovering Musical Journeys, the podcast that delves into the transformative power of music and the personal stories behind artists' journeys. I'm Marcel Zidani, author of the acclaimed Hey Presto Adult Piano Beginner Method book, a composer and a concert pianist. My life has been deeply intertwined with the world of music. It has been a journey filled with inspiration, creativity, and the pursuit of artistic excellence. And today I have a very special guest joining me, the multi-talented performer Alistair McGowan. Alistair is widely known for his incredible range of talents, from comedy and acting to impressionism, but today we have the privilege of exploring another side of his artistic repertoire, his return journey to the piano. Let's dive into uncovering musical journeys with my special guest, Alistair McGowan, as he shares his story of his return journey to the piano. Welcome, Alistair. It's a pleasure to have you.
Nice to be here, with birds singing in the background.
Birds tweeting down the chimney.
Yeah.
Alistair, after years of captivating audiences with your exceptional impersonations, you surprised everyone by publicly embracing your love for the piano. What inspired you to reignite your passion for this instrument?
It was a chance encounter, to be honest. Well, there were two things. A chance encounter with somebody I was doing some shows with on a cruise around Norway, and I'd always been able to play a couple of pieces through my 30s. I'd learnt two Eric Satie Nocien to play in a show that I was doing, and I learned them because I took up the piano when I was 8, gave it up when I was 9. So I just had 2 years, but I'd always wished that I'd played more and kept it up. So in my mid-30s, I learnt these two Satie Nocien, just those. I had a few lessons, but that fell away. So I was on this cruise in Norway, just noodling one night. I say night, it never went dark, and happened to be heard by the person who was accompanying me for a show I was doing. And she'd never heard me play, and she just said, "Oh, you play very well." I said, "That's all I play, Lucy." And she said, "Well, you should play some more." And I said, "It's too late. I'm 49. I can't learn now. It's just not possible. You've got to start when you're young and keep going." And she said, "Not true." And she said to me, and I've never forgotten it, she said, "I started working with somebody who was 60, and he began learning at 60, and by the age of 80 he was playing Grieg's Piano Concerto." Right. And I thought, that's what I want to do. 20 years' time, I want to play Grieg's Piano Concerto. And she just gave me the confidence. It's just one person can say that, and suddenly you think, well, if somebody else can do it, I can do it.
That's right. And are you anywhere near to playing Grieg's Piano Concerto?
Well, I'll be honest, it was always my aim, even though now what am I, 8 years in, and it's a long way off. Yeah. But I actually have developed this condition in my left hand called Dupuytren's, which happens to certain people, and it means that the fingers start to close in time. Right. So I've had to temper my ambition, and it came on, this condition. Apparently it's genetic, right. So it would have happened anyway. But I was playing a Philip Glass piece, right? And Philip Glass, as a lot of people know, is very repetitive. Mm-hmm. But if you're practicing, the French word for practice and rehearsal is répétition. Right. So I was doing my répétition of the repetitions. Right. So just doing the same thing again and again and again, in order to do the same thing again and again and again, I suddenly felt my whole hand was... And I thought, I've got to really temper my ambitions and play less and play within myself. And so now my ambitions have slightly receded. Yeah. So it's just a question of which other nice piece can I play. Right. So I'm in a bit of a limbo at the moment, because that was always the ultimate goal. Right. Okay. Could it be something to do with perhaps changing or relooking at technique, and perhaps there's another movement that you could use that would alleviate any pain you're having? Yeah, I think it's something that's never really talked about, and a lot of professionals, people like you, I'm sure, have the same issue. If you overplay, you can hurt anything. I mean, initially, when we worked on the album, which we'll come on to, I had lots of knee pain. Right. And people going, knee pain, playing the piano, and I said, it's the pedalling. Yeah. When you're suddenly pedalling, you're not used to it. I've never driven a car. I wasn't used to doing that, and it was excruciating pain in my knee. I had to have an injection to play the piano. Right. And anything that's repetitious, or repetitive, right? It can, even with good technique, if you are playing a lot, working with several projects. I've had the case where when I did the Grieg Concerto several years ago, I was also doing an hour's recital with a viola player, and also had my own piano music to be doing as well, and trying to get all of that practiced up to concert level is quite demanding, and on any pianist, whatever the technique, and so I think we have to be really careful to make sure that we get the right rest periods in as well. Well, this is something Lucy, who I met on the cruise, she went on to be my teacher on and off over several years, and she said to me, "You're playing too much." Right. And it's not often, she said it herself as a teacher, that I tell my people to play less.
Yes.
But I was just so keen and just absolutely loved it,
Yeah.
and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But you do have to be careful. And I said, but why, Lucy? No, it's not a physical activity. And she said, of course it's a physical activity. And she said to me very strictly, as she said most things, she said, you know, if you were an athlete, you would have to rest in between. This is an athletic event. And also if you're a tennis player or whatever else, even as an amateur, you've played all through your life, your body is used to it.
Yes.
So, but to take up something as demanding as the piano, age 49, you haven't had 40 years of your body getting used to these movements here, and the way it goes through the elbow, and it goes to the shoulder, and it goes through the back, and if you're hunched over the piano.
And I think that's why technique is very important, especially as later on in life, and it'll resonate with a lot of the members of the Facebook group, because they'll take it up. A lot of them have taken up piano in later life, and they begin by running with it, rather than having learned as a child and slowly progressing through.
Well, I think also, and it's something that Chopin said, I think, but you know, Chopin was Chopin, so you know, you have to take all that with a pinch of salt when you're a genius. But he, I think, said, don't practice more than 2 hours a day.
Right.
And then other people, I think he said it as well, play in 20-minute chunks.
Yeah.
Because the brain can only take in so much information in a period of time, and 20 minutes is the ideal time. So often when people would say to me, oh no, how do you find the time, you know, to do 2 hours practice a day? You say, well, I don't sit down for 2 hours.
No.
You know, you can do 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there, and it's actually sometimes the better way to do it.
Yeah.
Or if you do have your hour session or 2 hours, just make sure every 20 minutes you get up, you stretch your legs, you're not pedaling all that time, you're not bent over all that time. Even if it's just to get another piece of music or to get a drink or whatever else, or just to stretch something.
It is very good advice. 20 minutes, I think, is good enough to be sat there to concentrate for. Otherwise, it's easy to get distracted and not hear what you're actually playing.
Yeah, and also just to let the brain take it in, and to not get bored with one piece. And I contradict this advice all the time, because I'm sure anybody watching will know, if you love the instrument, which we all do, that's why we're doing this, time just goes. Yeah. And you suddenly think, it's 2 hours? I've been playing that bit for 2 hours? Yeah. So a good friend of mine, Rainer Hirsch, who's a wonderful comedy pianist, and well worth checking out his stuff on YouTube. But Rainer said to me, first thing I do, he said, practice. I take my watch off, I put it on the piano, and I look, and I work out 20 minutes, and then I change to something else. Right.
I think that's good, because sometimes when you feel like you want to do, it leaves you wanting more, and actually it starts getting you into a routine of then regular practice as well. So I think it's very important advice. I think you as well started in a similar way to me then. I started when I was very young for about a year, but then I took up the piano again at about age 10 and 11 and went from there and didn't stop. So it's interesting that you've had a gap, then went back to it, and now you've come back to it again.
Yeah. And I think the other thing about learning later in life, which other people have said to me, is it a disadvantage? Yes, of course it is in many ways, that you haven't got what you've had, I haven't got the musical knowledge in terms of the way music works. It's not instinctive, I can't work my way out of problems. But what you do have when you start later in life, I think, generally, is a love of music. In a way that when you're 4 or 5, you haven't been exposed to all these wonderful pieces by Ravel, by Satie, by Debussy, by whoever you like, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff. Right. When you get to 49, which was some distance ago now for me, but you've heard so much music over the years, you think, I'd love to play that piece, and somewhere, subliminally, you've worked out that you love Arietta by Grieg, that you love that piece of Schumann, that you love that, and that desire to play it because you've always liked it. Actually helps you learn, I think, because you've got this emotional connection with the music, which you really can't have when you're 4 or 5. Which is what was leading me on to my next question, which is how has your experience as an adult beginner differed from when you learned as a child? So perhaps you didn't get that love or enjoyment of the piano in quite the same way. No, it's the knowledge of the pieces, and also I think just the desire to express yourself. And it's amazing, it may happen during the interview, but the number of times I get moved to tears playing. And the first time, having worked on it for about, 2 months or so, that I put together all the bits of Grieg's Nocturne, which was a piece my mum had played, and I was playing it from her score, and she'd written the fingering on it, and she was not in a good state of health, as you knew my mum. But when I got through that piece for the first time, stumbling through, really, well, not playing it that well, but getting through the whole piece, I just burst into tears. I thought, I've wanted to do this since I was 9 years old. I've heard it through my life. I've always loved it. Here I am, 40 years later, playing it. And you think, if I had played that as a 9-year-old, it wouldn't have moved me. But at the age of 49, I thought, that means so much.
Yes.
And I know that that was in the playing as well, and you'd have heard that emotion in the playing.
Yes.
And in fact, when I listen to that CD, I hear a huge cry of pain, really, about my mum throughout every piece.
Right. Of your CD?
Yeah.
Right.
It was me, and obviously that's not just in the recording, it was in every practice session.
Yes.
It was me somehow wanting to claw back my mother and my youth.
Did she play most of these pieces that are on your CD?
No, some of them she did.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest sadness, is that, well, he knew my mum, but when she was still at home and I practiced them before the recordings, pieces that she played all her life, sometimes she'd say, "What's that piece? Who's it by?" And I think, "Oh, Mum, you used to play this every night." You know, poem by Fiddy,
right.
Song of India, which isn't on there, but on the second CD.
Yeah.
And that was really quite heartbreaking.
Right.
But no, she didn't play that many of them. She played more show tunes, you know, but every so often she'd play something classical, and I suppose that's when you find out what you like. My ears would prick up as a 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old, and I go, what's that?
Yeah. Well, we'll get on to who your inspiration was. I have a feeling your mother was something to do with it. But what, we'll come on to that. What motivated you to participate in festivals and perform in front of an audience? Because you were talking just then about you were moved to tears.
Yeah.
Was it particularly that you wanted to kind of share this incredible music with
a
others?
little bit. I'd love to say there was a great methodology. Basically, I'm a show-off, I suppose. As I was told when I was young, you're a show-off. And I think you have to be a bit of a show-off.
Yeah.
Also, I think you do want to share the music. You think, I want people to hear the beauty of this. But also, it gives you a goal. And I think the goal, because of my natural performing, instincts, was can I do this in public? Could I do this? It gives you this huge buzz. But I know there are people I've met on piano courses who would organise their own concerts, and they weren't, in big theatres like mine, but they would just hire a space, as you've done yourself, in the house even. Just get 20, 30 people around. I know you do far more than that, but just, if people do want a goal, that's what I'd say first of all, is just get a piece to a level where you can play it in front of your family, obviously, or friends, and then perhaps hire somewhere or ask 10 friends to come round and make it a social thing, or ask other pianists that you know. I'm sure people do a lot of this, and just share it with 3 or 4 pianists and 20 friends. But it just gives you that goal, and it does terrify you, but once you've done it once, it somehow becomes easier. And the big piece of advice I would give on top of that, if possible, and it doesn't always happen, and it's a lot of mind games being a performer, but sometimes I say to myself, it's not about you playing. If you can take yourself out of the equation and say, I want you as an audience to hear the beauty of this piece. So it's not about how well I play this piece, because then it's all on you. If you say, I want you to hear the beauty of this Grieg nocturne, see if you like it as much as I do. See if it means as much to you.
That's exactly the way I look at it when I play a concert. I think to myself, I'm going to play the Grieg piano concerto, and I'm just going to show them what this piece can be like. And it has absolutely nothing to do with me, although I am the performer interpreting it a certain way. But it's about the music foremost. But it is difficult, especially if you suffer from performance anxiety or nerves, to actually to be able to do that. But if you don't, if you're not if you're quite used to being in front of people and performing, is this very different, performing in front of the piano in a recital? Is it very different?
Totally different. I mean, by way of an analogy, years ago when I was at the height of my fame, I was asked to do a pro celebrity tennis event, the Cliff Richard tennis event at the NEC Arena in front of 11,000 people. And I was absolutely terrified. And somebody said backstage from the world of tennis, they said, but why are you nervous? You perform in front of people all the time. You think, but I perform something that I think I'm good at, that people tell me that I'm good at, and that I've done for 20 years, so I know how to cope with anything that goes wrong. Suddenly, just because it's an audience, it's a completely different thing. And also there is an expectation that you will be good because you're used to an audience, but no, you're doing something you're really not that versed in. So it didn't really help, but I suppose the one thing is that the best word for it is élan. you have a certain style, and you hope you can communicate with an audience, so you're not shy about things. You're used to saying, if you're there, I want you to hear this, rather than hiding away. So you do tend to, you relax into it more. But you play tricks as well. I mean, I always angle the piano, when yours obviously in here is at that angle, that 90-degree angle.
Yes.
I think a lot of performers do anyway, but I always turn mine on the stage around so that I don't really see the audience. I'm seeing the curtains in the wings, and they're catching that glimpse. And then the time I knew that I was doing well, I must have done about 20 concerts by this stage. But I remember I was in Leeds in a place called Besbrode Pianos.
Right.
And he'd got a concert space upstairs, beautiful old warehouse, Victorian warehouse. And I was playing this one piece, the List actually, the Consolation. And I was playing it and absolutely forgot there was an audience there. I lost myself in the music so much. And when I finished, I turned around and thought, I actually forgot that they were there.
Yeah.
And in that moment I thought, I think I've started to do this quite well now, because I just had lost any idea that they were there.
Yes. Yeah. And when it's important, what you were saying about goals, a concert can be, is a definite, good way of setting a goal. You've got a concert date fast approaching, and you need to have everything ready. Do you think exams are part of that as well? Have you taken exams, or do you just do more of the recitals? And
no, I think everybody has to find their best way of doing things and their preferred way. A lot of people said to me early on, in fact, Lucy, my first teacher, shall we put you in for exams? You should do your exams. And I knew, and I know this will upset certain people, but having had my sister Kay go through to grade 8 as a child, I was 3 years younger, and hearing her playing Scarlatti, Telemann, a lot of Beethoven, a lot of Mozart, it drove me mad. Once I heard her playing Debussy, Ravel, that sort of excited. I was going, I love this, Grieg, I've mentioned these names before. But I thought if I did exams, I'd have to play lots of pieces that I didn't like. Now I know, as a teacher, and more than a teacher, you would probably say, well, you should expose yourself to different styles, and you will learn counterpoint from Bach, and you will learn different things, and you will learn that repertoire and trilling from Mozart, Field, Chopin even. But at that age, I just thought, I haven't got the amount of time you have as a child. I don't want to waste my practice time learning a piece of Scarlatti, which I'll probably hate anyway, just to get through an exam and say, I've now got to grade 6. So that may be the wrong advice for some people, because as I said, you want to practice different styles, otherwise you just end up playing Debussy. But if you just want to play what you want to play, play what you want to play, and don't do the exams. But they are still a good goal. Yes.
I think they can present a good goal as well, and a lot of the beginners in the group will, some of them are doing exams, but it's not an exam-led group, especially as they're adults now. A lot of it becomes more down to, I think, parents and children. They're the ones that seem to take or put a lot more emphasis on the exams.
Well, I think it's invaluable. If it's well structured, as I say, I've got huge gaps in my knowledge, and they are structured well so that you progress.
And they are, but I will just say this on behalf of the exam boards, the exam repertoire has changed a little. It's a little bit more adaptable now, so that you wouldn't have to just learn from 1 or 3 different periods.
Oh, okay.
So it has changed a bit so I think it has modernised slightly.
But I think, as I say, that's invaluable if you're young. It's the best way to learn if you're young. I would say do the exams and you back that up. But later in life, I don't think it's necessarily the best way to go, really.
I think as well, if you've got a good teacher who's giving you some good advice, you're enjoying the music that you are learning is critical. If you're not going to go out there and play a Scarlatti sonata, then it may not be the right thing for you to spend your time working on something where you might not actually get the benefit of the progress in that way.
Definitely. But also I think, there are pieces that you warm to later, and I was suggested to play some Handel. It was an arrangement of Handel by, who arranges Handel? Not Reger, it was somebody like Reger. Anyway, that surprised me. I recently played a piece of Handel and absolutely loved it. So there are great pieces from that era. A lot of the Bach arrangements by Busoni or by, who was in the Bach, great, Salotti. Right. Wonderful to play. Right. But I just don't respond well to the other straight stuff from that period.
Okay. And so how do you balance practicing with your other commitments and responsibilities in your adult life? Because obviously you're very busy, doing lots of festivals, not all music related. I assume, and you've got other things. You've just done something in Evesham, the Festival of Word. So how do you balance your practicing with your other commitments?
I have a very patient wife, that helps, and no near neighbours, which also helps, so I can play late at night or early in the morning, although I'm not good in the mornings. I think early on I found it much harder because I was doing a lot more other things, but now I'm not really doing the impressions, and so what's happened is the time I used to spend studying for that and certainly watching television, and I don't know which one came first, but I suddenly realised that I would be watching football, sport, anything that I used to watch and take great pleasure in, and sitting there thinking, I could just be doing 20 minutes on that piece and get those next 2 bars. And sometimes I'd be hearing a bit in my head. I was learning Claire de Lune not long ago, and I'd hear this piece over and over again, this middle section, and I thought, do I want to watch The Doghouse, or would I rather be... And so it just became easy after a while.
Yeah, so it comes down to time management then, really.
Yeah, always time management, and just things that you thought were attractive or important suddenly become less attractive and important because this takes over. And I think you just find the time. You think, oh, I won't do that. I don't need to go out there. I could just do another 20 minutes on the piano, and it was harder to pull myself away than it was to go.
Yeah, I think that's when you are really driven. That's where you're going to get the most progress and the best out of the instrument.
Yeah, and that comes again from goals, and deadlines are really important, I think, for that.
And once you obviously routine, then once you're in that routine, and then just starts to snowball. So what advice would you give to adult piano beginners who are considering returning to the piano but feel hesitant or unsure about taking the leap?
I'd say do it, but I would also say identify a piece. Well, maybe 3 pieces was the advice I was given by a gentleman called Paul Roberts, who's a wonderful teacher and player, and he said always have 3 pieces. So you have one that you know is really within your grasp, one that's a little bit hard for you as a challenge, and one perhaps which is, even if you're not working on it now, it's something that you think, I want to progress to that level.
Right.
And again, that's where the grade system is really useful. And I looked through a lot of grade books from the 60s and 70s that my wife had, because she played to grade 5, grade 6. And you just think, oh, that piece by Gershwin, the prelude, second prelude, is grade 8, I think.
Yeah.
But you think, okay, so if that's classified as grade 8, I won't start on that yet. Oh, the John Field Nocturne number 5, oh, that's grade 4. All right, so that's perhaps within my... So it was useful to look at those old grade books and see what is the sort of standard of difficulty. You could do it online now, I suppose. Yeah. What is the standard of difficulty of this piece?
Yes.
And to make sure you're playing something which is achievable.
Yeah.
For me, Satie, the Gnossienne and the Gymnopédie were, apart from 5 and 6 Gnossienne, were very, very achievable, even though some of them have got difficult key signatures. They're much easier than you think. And that was something that was within my grasp, and to make a nice sound early on and to complete a piece, I think is really important. So that's the advice I would give, is choose a piece that is clearly Tchaikovsky, the album for the young, which always makes me think albums for the young are just going to be about soldiers and little toy figures. Some of them are. In Tchaikovsky, they've got those names, but there's a piece there which is on that album called The Sick Doll. Actually, it might be on the second one. It is. The Sick Doll. It's so spare, very few notes, easy to get on top of, but it takes a lot of good technique to make it sound beautiful.
And musical understanding, particularly with Schumann. I've just played the viola piano fairy tale pictures, and notes not necessarily incredibly difficult, but incredibly difficult to actually articulate and to play in a musical way, and to get into the mind of something like that.
And again, that depends on the taste and what you like. But for me, Satie, those sort of pieces with very few notes, were a great tool. A, because you can get on top of them quickly, you can make a nice-ish sound quickly. But also, yes, to make a really nice sound, you've got to listen. And I remember one of the pianists, I won't name him, but who I saw quite early on when I came back to the instrument, and I saw him playing again recently. It's the same thing. I could see him listening to himself, and it's very rare because he played pieces that I loved. He wasn't just playing things where it was great showmanship, Liszt, whatever, where it's so many notes. These were spare pieces, but I could actually hear him listening to the sound. And I think that's so important, no matter what level or speed of piece you're playing, is to listen to yourself. And when you can hear the sound dying away in a slow piece, then your technique's going to improve on everything, because you are listening to the sound you're making. But,
I think what you were saying is a very interesting point about setting realistic goals. If you are trying to then, as a beginner, you've got an appetite to do some Liszt or the Clair de Lune is a much more difficult piece to finish off in a refined fashion, and so I think if you can take on realistic goals, and as you would say, looking through the different grades to find out what level the pieces were of difficulty, if you set yourself a challenge, a real challenge, it could be very difficult to rise to that challenge, or actually when you find you can't master the notes or play it in a musically engaging way, then it can often leave you frustrated.
Yes,
really.
Definitely, very much. And sometimes you have to leave a piece alone and say, okay, I've got that far with it, that bit is too hard for me, I'll come back to it.
Yeah.
And this is something I'm finding now, actually, having played for 8 or 9 years now. I'm going back to lots of pieces at the moment, this phase, that I played a long time ago, and thinking, I used to play that, it's gone. Then going back and suddenly thinking, oh, that means I've got to start it again. And yet, if you fingered it well, and literally written the fingering in, and you go back to your old score, for somebody like me, I can't sight read, I can't just play it straight away, but it comes back so much more quickly than you think. You haven't got to start again because you've done that work before.
You've done the groundwork.
And Rachmaninoff said famously, you take a piece, you take it apart, you look into how it works, and then when you've understood it, you put it back together again. And it is that thing, once you've taken a piece apart, you do have to struggle to get back into it, completely, but that work you've done on a piece will never go away.
No.
So even if, as I say, like there's the Chopin Nocturne I've always wanted to play, and I've now written it off, it's just too difficult, one of the posthumous ones. But I did a lot of work on the beginning, and when I went back to it again to do the middle section, that work was still there, it was still within me. Even though it took some work, it was still there.
You'll be surprised how quickly. It might seem difficult to begin with coming back to a piece, but you'll be surprised how much you have retained from your previous practice.
Yeah.
And it's then easier for you to move forward with it.
Yeah.
So I think,
sorry, just to interrupt, there's some comfort in, there was a quote, I think it's Liszt, who said, we never stop learning the piano.
No.
And you think, wow, okay.
That's
and
true.
Glenn
Very
Gould,
true.
I think Glenn Gould said, you never master this instrument. And when you hear people of that stature saying you never stop learning, you never master it, you go, okay, it's not just me.
That's okay. Relief.
You're always learning, you're always learning. And I find that frustrating at first, because I'm somebody who likes to think with a crossword kind of head. Right, done that, off we go.
Yeah.
And you can't ever say that with the piano.
Even
with
once
a piece.
you've been doing it for 40 years and you still find you've got a lot to learn, you realise then they're absolutely right.
And you play a piece in a different way each time, something like the Bach Prelude, which seems like one of the simplest pieces in the world. You can find so many different ways of playing it. Every time you can think, I'll bring out that note this time, I'll bring out this note that time. That's not true in every piece, but that one you really can, and it still sounds beautiful. So the feeling of I'm never going to complete this is actually not a bad feeling at all, it's a good feeling. You're always improving.
Yeah. I want to get onto your CD. Could you share with us the process for selecting the pieces for your CD?
Well, the CD, I did this in 2017, or it was released in 2017, so I recorded it at the back end of 2016, 2017, so I started playing in 2015, I think, so this was very early on.
Right.
So the pieces I chose were often pieces that I'd either tried and just put aside or fiddled around with, something I had a knowledge of. Then, as it went on, the process, I realised that probably what I needed was about 34 pieces.
Right.
Because we had, I thought, you wanted an album to be about 100 minutes. So I thought if I record 120, then there's wastage. So we worked on, as it turned out, 34 pieces, short pieces. So I looked for things that were accessible or things that I knew fairly well. The idea initially was to call it 14 pieces that you can play.
Right.
And there were 17 on there, and Sony said, well, that's wrong, there's 17. I said, yeah, but there's 14 that you can play. And they said, well, which 14? And I said, well, that's going to vary depending on who you are.
Yeah.
But they said it's all too obtuse and it's not going to work. But I love the Satie-esque idea of 14 pieces you can play, but there were 17. And if anybody wrote to me, I'd say, well, that wasn't one of the ones I said you could play. But something I'd hear on the radio while I was still working on the first few, I heard a couple of pieces, and my father-in-law heard a piece by Debussy and he said, you've got to play this, and the Philip Glass Metamorphosis, he heard that and he said, you've got to play that. So I'd look at them, and he spotted quite a few. And I just think one thing from somebody, one bit of praise, you were really helpful on the Gedeka, and in fact, you said to me that piece is an exam piece. You know, you've got to be sure that you're absolutely on top of this because people will know.
Right.
And I think that was really helpful. And indeed, the person who really helped hugely on the album was the producer on the day. We did it over 5 days, over 4 months. And Chris Hazel, his name was, and he'd worked on a lot of classical albums for Sony, and was a fantastic musician. And he would say to me that that you're holding for 3, you're only holding for 2. It's disappeared from that next bar. We need that A in that bar. I'd never known that sort of precision. And you're the same with the Gedeka. You think if you take your finger off a note too early, that changes the sound. And that's what I was saying about listening to yourself. And when you listen and you hear that a sound disappears just too early, you think Debussy or whoever it was wanted that note held on for a reason. And if you take it off and it's not there, the sound of that chord is suddenly changed. And that's something I think which is so important is listening and being taught how to listen, as well as being taught how to learn, is almost as important, if not more, than being taught how to play the piano.
That second is really important to have a producer like that, because having a second or third ear on what you're doing, because often we're very distracted by the recording process and everything else going on. Something can easily slip. So I think it's vital having that extra.
And I think then in performance, you've got to decide at your level, which is above mine, you know, how much freedom you allow yourself, because you don't want to be so hidebound that you're not in the moment, that you're not playing the piece. But you've got to know what it is to sound when it does sound right. And it does mean holding that note on. And I think it's something we're all guilty of, is if it's a held note, you think, if it's just held, I can go on to the next bit. It's held for a reason, because it's part of that sound world. Yeah,
and often creating the moment, and we don't want to. You want to phrase things in the right way, and so you want to finish a phrase nicely before perhaps moving on to the next one. Perhaps there's a bit of air needed in between. How instrumental then was your piano teacher in helping you develop your technique and musicality? And in what specific ways did they contribute to your progress?
I mean, it's just invaluable. I'm not an online person, so I don't even know what we're doing. I don't know what this is. I don't really do anything online. But I know you can learn a lot online, but I think having somebody in the room, having somebody listening specifically to you is just invaluable. And like I say, it can be one comment about how you hold your hand. It took me several years, and I just happened to work with a teacher in Ludlow in person, who just did one exercise with me in one morning on looseness of wrists. And over all the 4 years where I've been playing, and people have said, if you could just loosen your wrists, you'd be so much better. I go, I don't know how to make my wrists loose. He gave me this one exercise, and within half an hour he said, well, you've done it, you've now got loose wrists. And then somebody who saw me play and hadn't seen me for a year said, when did you start playing with loose wrists? And it was just something that he said somehow that unlocked it.
Yeah, it's quite, it can be difficult to grasp the concept when someone says you've got to have a looseness with the wrists, or relaxed playing, play in a relaxed way. That's a word that's kind of difficult to for a teacher to put across to the student in the right way. I don't think saying loose or saying play in a relaxed way is actually going to achieve the student understanding.
No, and I think possibly that's something when you're practicing a piece, rather than just starting again, saying, right, now can I play it again? Can I get it better this time? It's trying to play it in different ways. And sometimes you think, right, now I know what the notes are. Now why don't I play it really slowly? Do I know it that slowly? Do I know it that well? Then think, right, now shall I play it with really loose wrists? And yes, you'll make mistakes, but it'll sound different, and just to play around with it rather than just going, I'm going to do the same thing again. That was one of the lessons I picked up on my last course from James Lisney, was avoid mindless repetition. So you think you're doing yourself a favour by just going over and over it. I've always thought that, and I still fall into that trap, but he said avoid mindless repetition. So even if you're playing that piece again, do something different with it. Think about loose wrists. Think about what happens if I really concentrate on bringing out the top note in my little finger there. Avoid mindless repetition.
Good advice. And think about the approach as well, the way you're going to practice. Have a methodology about it. And can you share any moments or experiences where your piano teacher's guidance significantly impacted your approach to playing the piano? Would it be the loose wrist thing that was one of the most biggest helps for you?
Definitely, and also I think something that my teacher from the cruise, if people can remember that, whenever we were talking about that, she said to me, she has this wonderful image of trees on an avenue and how they're planted at a certain distance apart, in France particularly, and then they move in the breeze. And she said, you've got to get your trees planted in the right place, meaning you've got to obey the rhythm of that piece. And when you know the rhythm, then you can move it a bit. Right. Then you can do your rubato, you can add little bits, especially a piece like Lotus Land by Cyril Scott I was playing, which sounds very free and jazzy, but she said, you've got to know the rhythm, got to know the distance between those trees, and then they can sway.
Yeah, very often I see the contemporary music, such as more jazzy pieces, very in a very similar way to Bach, and the tempo and the counting and a lot of the rhythms too.
I'm just about to start work, I hope, on a piece by Ginastera, and it's his first. I played the second Argentinian dance, which is beautiful and sexy, but the first one is all about rhythm, and I think this will be a great piece for me. It's a bit ugly. But it's the rhythm and the drive of the rhythm, but it's got to be absolutely right. And I'm looking forward to starting on that soon.
Right. And how do you feel your piano teacher, influenced your overall musical development? Did they shape your musical preferences or expand your repertoire in any meaningful way?
Oh, always. I mean, people who can just say, because nobody knows everything about classical music or piano. You know, you imagine that, oh, I know this bit, I know that bit. Everyone has their specialist areas, and everybody, no matter who they are, is being introduced to something at some point by somebody else. And so I think that, you know, oh, you should play this, you should play that. I'd heard over the years Rachmaninoff's Moments musicaux, and number 5 I always liked particularly. I tried to play it. There's lots of 2 against 3. There's some quite awkward fingering, and I thought, no, that's not for me. So I put it to one side and thought, I'm never going to be good enough to do that. And then I was on a course recently with Paul Roberts, who I mentioned before, and he was playing it. He said, you should play this is a piece for you. And I said, it's too hard, Paul. He went, it was hard for you 6 years ago, not now. So I went straight to that, and I've been working on that, and yes, it's hard to play it really well, but I managed to get through it and fairly quickly. So again, it's just a nod from somebody saying, this is the piece you should play next. Have you thought about this one? They're not always going to be right for you, but it's invaluable.
I think, yes, sometimes things that you played, and once you get into the piano journey, time goes by, and if you've kept up your routine and you've kept up your regular practice and you're listening to your teachers or wherever you're getting the information from and you're regular, then as time goes by, you'll find that a lot of these pieces, they soon come into your area of technique, or to that, and that you're able to do a lot more than perhaps you once would have done.
Yeah, and I suppose the choice you have to make if you're a more advanced age is, are they saying to you, you could play this because it sounds like the other pieces you play, which is a nice thing because it's in your style, so they've identified a style, which is nice. But sometimes they'll try and stretch you and say you should play. I was pushed towards a Bach invention repeatedly. Go and play a Bach invention. I just cannot.
No.
I can't.
Is it motivation there then? You're not, the style doesn't fulfill you in that musical way, and you're searching for something else out of music.
It's exactly that, and it goes back to the stuff that my mum played really. Anything that sort of sounds like it's romantic or has what I call, I don't know if it's even a musical term, but a sweep. Rachmaninoff is full of these wonderful sweeps, and you know, I can't begin to play much more than that Moments musicaux by Rachmaninoff because it's so big, but anything that's got that sweep. There's a piece by York Bowen that I've been learning called Serious Dance 2, and that's got some wonderful sweeps in it. And I played that on the piano course, just sort of messing around the last one I went on, and everyone said, what's that? But it has this sweep. But I did hear people on that course playing some Bach, and I thought, that's quite beautiful, I should try that. But the minute I tried this particular, it's the aria from, the Goldberg Variations, and I just couldn't begin, and I can't remember the mordants and whether it's down and up or up and down. And
you definitely need some help with Bach.
Definitely.
And it's also an approach, methodical approach, perhaps hands separately, and some real discipline to actually master the technique and music of Bach.
And that, as you say, is where you need a teacher. I can start playing my Debussy and I can hear what I want to play, and I can stretch it and think of my trees, but and it's something instinctive about Debussy that I get drawn to, the easier ones.
Well, certainly I think the music that you like, or have a particular affiliation for, is the music you're going to most likely perform in the best way, and be able to grasp a lot more, or seem to grasp it a lot easier. So how would you emphasise the importance of having a piano teacher for say, aspiring pianists? And what advantages or benefits do you believe from learning with that you get from learning with a teacher?
It's just invaluable. I think not only just comments here, they can observe your fingering, they can stop you from getting into bad habits. Like it's the same with tennis. Once you've started to play badly, it's hard to undo a habit that's a bad habit. The teacher can stop that early on. They can inspire you. And also I just think, even though I said, set yourself regular goals, there's no greater goal than knowing you're going to be seeing your teacher in a week's time or 2 days' time or two weeks' time. It just gives you that goal. It's the same with Pilates or anything else. You do it, yes, for you, but when you feel you're doing it for somebody else as well, it just makes you work that bit harder. So I think there's no real substitute. And I'm sort of in between teachers at the moment, or have a number of teachers, and but the one thing that they will all say, or did say to me early on, is, I can't do your practice for you.
No.
So yes, you can have a good teacher, but it's up to you to do things.
It is down to you to do the work.
Yeah.
A teacher, it's a two-way thing. So obviously it's not just, it's a piano journey, but it's a piano journey with a piano, often the student and the teacher. If you're going to go down that route, a lot of the members of the Facebook group won't actually have a teacher, or don't intend to have a teacher. They're perhaps learning something that isn't classical music, pop music, and a lot of that you can just take the basics from online YouTube videos and do a pretty good job, or a very good job. I think if you're looking at learning Bach or any substantial, difficult classical music, it's going to be very difficult to progress as quickly and as injury-free without having some kind of professional oversight, professional teacher there to either look at you online or face-to-face.
And to encourage you, to pat you on the back when you're doing good things, and to give you the tiniest little hint here and there specifically for you and for your spirit, for your soul, for your interest. Also, I think one thing that Lucy taught me early on, as I say, I'm not a technological person, but she said one of the best things you can do, and I do it a lot, is record yourself playing on your phone or whatever, and then listen back. Because I used to curse myself for not being able to get this bar right, or making a mess of this bar. And yes, of course, the answer is go back and just do that bar. Yeah. But she would also say to me, but look at the 52 bars, or listen to the 52 bars you got right. And I thought, oh, that's true. So obviously in performance, you can't say, well, I got 52 out of 53 bars right, didn't I? Or it wouldn't be 53, but even so. But when you listen back, you can surprise yourself and hear yourself and think, actually, that's not bad. Yeah. That's coming on. There are nice moments within that. So record yourself a lot.
It's very important, because when you are performing, or when you're practicing, you're often distracted by actually physically making the sound and the notes and everything else that you don't always hear. It is very difficult sometimes for a student to listen to what they're actually playing, because they're too busy trying to get everything together, and it's distraction. And so I think having a recording your playing, and then listening to it back, you can then spot where you need to phrase things more nicely.
And particularly counting, because you can listen to it back in in many different ways. So I think you can listen, is it sounding nice? Yeah. But also, if you then listen back and ignore the sound and just count and go, I'm way off there, I'm way off there. Of course, you also have the beauty of the metronome, but the metronome to me is just, I can't, it's such a nag. It's the worst thing in the world, the metronome, I hate it. Whether it's one of those or one of those, it's just...
Well, a lot of people in the group will advocate for the metronome. I'm one that uses it for checking a speed occasionally, rather than actually to put it on to my students, you've got to play to the metronome. I think having that inner beat is what we want to develop. And so I don't put too much emphasis in my teaching, but I know that others are different and do put the metronome on and make you play a whole sonata with it. But that's not the way I do things.
No, it's useful at times, I think, but I hate the thing.
Yeah. Well,
but I shouldn't. It's the worst sort of exercise. I just...
Okay, so you've just set up your first piano festival in Ludlow, which was a resounding success, and you're a great ambassador for adults returning to the piano. Will there be another festival next year? And how was the festival received? And can you tell us more about the festival overall.
Yes, the Ludlow Piano Festival was a huge gamble, I suppose, really. It was something I wanted to do, and we had 5 days worth of activities, 18 events over 5 days. But the first day was just the launch concert, which was a celebrity concert. And that's one of the reasons why I started. I was asked when someone knew I had a sniff of me being a pianist, said, would you play in front of people in King's Place in London? So I did, and it was a great incentive. So we based it on that. And we had people like Katie Derham played, and Joe Brand played, and Rob Rinder was the host, and Giles from Gogglebox came and played. Various other people came and played, Gary Richardson, Sarah Walker, lots of people who I can't now bring to mind. So that launched us very well and got the word out. We also had street pianos, so we put 2 street pianos. Right. And in fact, several of the finalists from The Piano on Channel 4 played in our celebrity concert as well. And people loved the street pianos. There's a wonderful vibe around the town. And then we had 4 days of top recitalists coming and playing some contemporary pieces. One of your pieces was played very nicely by Anthony Hewitt. And as soon as it had finished with a concert by Joanna McGregor in our lovely church, which holds 300 and is the biggest church in the country that isn't a cathedral, great Steinway in there. As soon as it had finished, people said to me, what are you going to do next year? And I thought, well, we haven't even thought about it, we just wanted to get this one out of the way. But now we've decided we are going to do it. And try and do some more exciting events. And I want it to be quirky. I want it to, because I come from a different world, I suppose, a little bit more show busy than perhaps people might expect for a regular classical festival. So I like the music to be short. I like the pianists to talk to the audience. Lots of different events.
I think it's very good if you're having some interaction with the pianist as well. If the pianist is able to say something about the pieces, I think that always does go down well.
I think it does, and when I've been to recitals over the years, you watch people and you think, this is wonderful, you're speaking through the piano, and if people saw that fabulous moment, which we'll never forget, those who saw of Lucy playing the Debussy and Chopin on the piano, this girl who can't see and can't communicate well, but she spoke through the piano. You could really see her communicating through this instrument. It was beautiful. But often people who do play so beautifully, that's how they communicate, and don't necessarily speak that well. And if you can just hear something from the pianist, you sit and watch and you think, but who are you? Just tell me something about yourself. I want to hear your voice. And I think that's one thing we look for, or I look for in my recitalists, is can you also talk to the audience? Because it helps just to know a bit about a piece. When I played my concert, I would talk in between all the pieces and make jokes in between. That's what I do. That's what people wanted. That's what I wanted to do. But I also talked a bit about the piece coming up. And I remember the one that I really illustrated was Debussy's Sunken Cathedral. And just to say to people, listen out for this story. Listen for the cathedral rising from the water. The monks start to sing again. The bells start to chime again. And people would come up afterwards and say, I could really hear that because you told me what it was. And that's what I like as well. I
think that's important because often there are programme notes which are very detailed, but often they don't get read, or they're being read during the performance. And so I think it's really important to say something about the piece itself that people are really going to be able to take on board. A lot of people might not know the pieces of music that you're going to play, especially if it's a premiere of some kind, and so actually having some kind of understanding of what the composer's intent was as well can be really helpful.
Definitely. And we also made a decision not to print programmes because as a performer, I'm sure you've had the same thing, you give a programme out and you just hear people rustling it and they drop it and they fan themselves with it, and or if you go, you read it. And I realised that when we did the final concert of our 18, Joanna McGregor, I was aware that everybody was so focused on her. And I thought, this is amazing. Is it the church? Is it Joanna? Is it the piano? It was all those things, but it was also because they were just listening. There was no visual stimulation. So they were only using one sense, which was hearing. So they were just listening. Nobody moved during the concert. And I guarantee if there'd been programmes, they'd have been down here. Suddenly you're missing the music, you're reading about it, you're distracted, you've missed the bit that you're reading about anyway.
There was quite a programme, and she played from Bach to Schumann to her own arrangements of
Nina Simone,
and Piazzolla as well, which was quite fascinating stuff. And very impacting. And I think she did hold the listener's attention there.
We've got lots of ideas again for this year, which will be May the 22nd to May the 26th, 2024. for people to come and enjoy lots of music and all written for the piano, but branching out a little bit. Maybe we'll have a jazz concert this time and just show what the instrument can do in all its guises. So it's bringing everything together with the piano, really. I've even got an idea, well, I better not say it in case it doesn't come off, but to bring a bit more contemporary, shall we say, the rock world into it as well.
Okay.
So
Great.
because it's so easy to stratify music and to be snobbish or inverted snobbery about music, and I hope that's not what comes across with me in Bach and Beethoven. It's just taste. But I think some people just think, oh, I don't want to play all that posh stuff. I want to play I Now Do, whatever else it is, which they consider more contemporary. And other people say, oh, that I Now Do stuff isn't of merit, and it's all of merit and it's all taste. So we want to try and encompass that.
That's great. So I've got a copy of your CD here. Alistair McGowan, the piano album. Where's the best place to get a copy? And can you tell me where and what you are currently working on, piano-wise, or acting?
Briefly, I think the best place to get a copy is from my wardrobe, where most of them I bought them all because they were going to trash them. So they're in my wardrobe. You can probably get them from my agent. I think it can be downloaded and is on Spotify, and I don't really know. Or come and see me live playing, and I'll be selling copies afterwards. But there are not many of them left, actually.
Right.
There is now a second album, which was this is the 17 tracks I mentioned, 34.
Yeah.
They were kept for a second album by Sony, which they never released for whatever reason. So we released it ourselves last year.
Right.
So I've got plenty of copies of those in my wardrobe as well.
Okay.
So yeah, come to my wardrobe. Just write to Narnia. And also, my agent has some. I'm sure if people look online, it's not a great thing, is it?
So these were recorded at the same time?
They were recorded at the same time, then the other one was brought out 6 years later. And interestingly, perhaps disappointingly, here's a selling point or not, but I can now hear the mistakes that I probably couldn't hear at the time.
Right.
I can hear the things that I would have improved on now.
And that's the thing, a mistake isn't necessarily a mistake in notation. It could be a mistake in the weight of how you've played a phrase of music, and you've actually imbalanced it slightly dynamically, or you perhaps wanted to phrase it in a more dynamic way. It can be a very simple thing like that, which would be classed as a mistake as well.
Yes, it's not mistakes in the notes. It really is that. It's phrasing and maybe being a bit too heavy on a note or too light on a note. It's so subtle, everything. But that's part of the question. I can't remember the rest of the question. It was a good long question, though.
It was a long one. Actually, no.
What am I working
Where's
on
the best
now?
place? What are you working on now? And piano-wise or acting?
I've got no real big projects in mind. I feel I've done everything in the sense that I wanted to do with a lot of things. So the Piano Festival in Ludlow is a massive thing for me now. I really enjoy curating and going to watch other pianists and thinking, will we have that? Will we have that? Could we get that? Big names, new names, whatever. And in terms of my own playing, I don't know if I'll do another show like that. I don't know. It was very demanding to be playing I did 15 pieces in my show, and then stand up in between, and all the travelling and everything in between from Aberdeen to Brighton.
And it must play on the memory as well. You've got to obviously you playing from music or memorised.
It was about 3/4 memorised, I suppose. But the problem with it is, which is the question for you and anybody else, I'm sure, professionals. You think, how many times can you play a certain piece? Because you have a repertoire which you're comfortable with on stage. So I would add to my 15 and subtract, so there was always maybe 4 new pieces each time I toured.
I think that's a good balance, is to always play something that you're comfortable with.
Yes.
As well as bringing in 1 or 2 new pieces, so that you are still engaged musically and enjoying learning new pieces. And there's going to be, if you are constantly repeating the same things in classical music, I find, then it's easy to, at home, let the boredom sink in, and the sinks in. And I think to have continuous new music is going to alleviate that.
That's what I felt. So I needed to step back from doing that programme and just think, I can't keep playing Arietta, I can't keep playing...
Because it's not just that one performance. When you're practising at home, you may be hours and hours and hours doing it every day. And so I think it's really, to keep fresh, you need new repertoire to come in.
I don't know if this story is worth telling, you can edit it out, but I worked years ago with Colin Jackson, the athlete, and it was just after the 2012 Olympics, and all the British athletes had said, what are you going to do now to celebrate your gold medal? And they said, I'm going to have some chocolate and a pizza. I'm going to have chocolate and a pizza. And they'd obviously deprived themselves. So I said to Colin Jackson after all this, I said, does it really make a difference to eat chocolate and a pizza, once in 4 years if you're in the Olympic final? And he said, it doesn't make any difference here. It doesn't make any difference in any case. But when you're on the final, in the start line of the final, like I was in Atlanta in 1996 at the 110 metre hurdles, and maybe you've had a bit of chocolate the night before, you're looking across that start line and you're thinking, I bet he hasn't had some chocolate in the pizza. I bet he hasn't had chocolate in the pizza. And that translates a bit into performing live.
Yeah.
If you haven't gone over that piece, the week before, the day before, all those times before, even though you've played it all your life, you think, I bet Paul Lewis would have played it through.
Yeah.
I bet Lang would have played it through. I haven't played it through. And you probably didn't need to play it through, but it goes through your head, I should have played it through.
Yeah.
So you do play it through, and yes, you get stale with it. So I'm taking some time off to get some new pieces, and then maybe I'll go back.
Yeah. And finally then, is there any broad or detailed advice you would like to share to beginner pianists or those returning to the piano?
The only thing I've probably almost covered it is just to say it's not about learning at an advanced age. It's not about learning how to play the piano. I think the most important thing is learning how to learn. So you learn the best way of getting the best from your time.
Right.
And you don't spend time doing pieces you don't want to play or wasting time, mindless repetition. You work out the best way to learn. And once you've worked that out, which can happen pretty quickly, you will learn more quickly because you've worked out how to learn, not how to play.
That's right. I think that's very, very good advice.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this episode, Uncovering Musical Journeys. I want to extend my deepest thanks and gratitude to Alistair McGowan for sharing his remarkable return journey to the piano with us today. Alistair's story reminds us all of the power of following our passions, even when they lead us on unexpected paths. Alistair's dedication and love for the piano have not only reignited his own creativity, but have also inspired countless others to pursue their artistic dreams. Thank you to everyone for joining us on this musical odyssey. We hope Alistair's story has sparked a renewed appreciation for the profound impact of music in our lives. Don't forget to subscribe to Uncovering Musical Journeys on your favourite podcast platform and share it with fellow music enthusiasts. We have many more inspiring stories lined up for future episodes, each one delving into the transformative power of music and the incredible journey of artists across genre. Remember, music has the remarkable ability to heal, uplift, and connect us on a deeper level. So let's keep exploring the world of melodies, harmonies, and rhythms together. Before we say our final goodbyes, I want to share an exciting opportunity with all our listeners who have been inspired by Alistair's return journey to the piano. If you've been longing to embark on your own musical adventure, now is the perfect time to take that first step. At Adult Piano Beginners, we are offering a special promotion to our listeners. The online course is designed specifically for adult learners aged 11 and upwards who are eager to discover the joy of playing the piano. Whether you're a complete beginner or someone looking to refresh their skills, this course provides a supportive and engaging learning environment, and I will be there every step of the way. By taking advantage of this offer, you'll gain access to comprehensive video lessons, practice exercises, and a supportive community of fellow learners. So why not harness the power of music to enrich your own life? Simply visit adultpianobeginners.com to redeem this exclusive offer and begin your own piano journey today. Remember, it's never too late to embrace your musical passions and unlock the transformative potential of the piano. Thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, keep the melodies alive.